In this lecture, we are going to discuss Russian formalism. As the name implies that formalism means that form is the source of meaning. We are going to draw the meanings of a text by keeping in mind its form. So it's called Russian formalism because there were the Russian writers who were responsible for introducing this type of concept. So that's why it's called Russian formalism. And whereas Russian formalism is concerned, there are two ways of drawing meanings from a text. The very first thing is that the word on page are the source of meaning. That's also called a close reading of the text. Now here it is also something related with new criticism, because new critics are also of the view that words on a page are the source of meaning. A close reading of the text, whatever there is written on the page, that is the source of meaning. No one else is the source of meaning. So here also is the case with this, that words on page are source of meaning. So this is the one way of drawing meaning. The other way is to draw contextual meaning. So what is the context? Contextual meanings means that you are going to draw the meanings of a piece of literature by trying to keep in mind the social background of that book, the cultural background of that book, the economical background of that book, the religious background of that book, and the social background of that book or ethical background of that book. So these are not only the backgrounds of the book, these are also the backgrounds of the writer who is going to write them and who has written a piece of literature. So this is the thing which is related to contextual meanings. So whereas this Russian formalism is concerned and also new criticism, contextual meanings are not given importance because they will have to focus upon the biography of the writer, the autobiography of the writer. Now again writer will be the source of meaning, and this Russian formalism is going to negate those meanings. Then whereas the words on page are so the meaning, it means the text is the source of meaning. Now again Russian formalism is also against this thing that writer is not the source of meaning, author is not source of meaning. No, it is also against expressive realism that author is the not source of meaning, because we cannot understand the real intentions of a writer when he was writing any piece of literature. So writer is not the source of meaning. Then there is reader. So reader again is not the source of meaning, because reader response theory means the reader is going to interpret a piece of literature by keeping in mind his own background, social background, political background, moral, ethical values. Then there is economical background, his religious background, his social nature and nurturing, everything is there. So again reader is not the source of meaning. Then what is left there? Text is there. Text is the source of meaning. Words on page are the source of meaning, and words on page are called form. So form is source of meaning. That's why it is called formalism, because formalism is a word that is derived from form. Now it started in 1910 and it ended in within 10 or 15 years. Around about 1920 it ended. And now it is no more in practice. There is not any piece of literature that is still practiced with reference to this. It's no more in practice. Now the next most important question is that now why is it ended so soon? So that we will discuss later on. So whereas this Russian formalism is concerned, each and every theory is always a reaction against always existing theory. So this, before this there was a theory that was existing there, that was that there was a school of thought that's called Marxistic school of thought. So in Marxism that's related with something economy, and then there is special thing over there is that there is a division of class. There is a class struggle. Society is divided into classes. There are bourgeois from upper class and middle class people who are mill owners, who are industry owners, who are landlords. They are bourgeois. Then they are also called petty bourgeois. Then there are those people who are called proletariats. Proletariat means they are slaves, they are workers. So the society, according to Marx and Marxists, is divided into haves and have-nots. Those who have something and those who don't have, those who are workers and those who are the owners of mills and lands. So, and at that time, the critics were of the view that if you want to understand a piece of literature, we will have to keep in mind the class struggle. Now, still the background of that, because Marxists were of the view that social background, political background is very much important, and that makes history. That is materialistic history. That is also, it's called dialectical materialism, mean that class cannot be negated, society cannot be negated, context of that piece of literature cannot be negated, even the context of that writer cannot be negated. When the context cannot be negated, it means that the source of meaning according to Marxism is this context. And this Russian formalism, it is against contextual meaning. So there were certain critics residing over there. They started thinking about things that why not to challenge this concept of Marxism and this contextual background. And what was the result? Result was Russian formalism. That no context, no background, no biography, no autobiography, only form is the source of meaning. And whereas this formalism is concerned, there were two groups of formalists at that time. The first was headed by Moscow Linguistic School or Moscow Linguistic Circle, and Roman Jakobson was the pioneer of this. It was headed by Roman Jakobson, and according to him, there are two fundamental structures of language. Number one, there is metaphor, and other is metonymy. It means that by understanding metaphors in a piece of literature, by coming to know the metonymy, use of metonymy in a piece of literature, we can understand the meanings of a text. Then the other school of thought was Prague Linguistic School or Prague Linguistic Circle. It was headed by Viktor Shulevsky, one of the most important names with reference to Russian formalism. Art as technique. Whereas defamiliarization is concerned, literariness is concerned, then difference between language, everyday language and scientific language. So these were the person, they started thinking that let us challenge this existing system of analyzing a text by keeping in mind Marxistic views that where context is the source of meaning, and context is going to make history. Context is going to tell us that what is a text about. So these were the people who raised slogan against this contextual meanings, and the result was what is called Russian formalism. So it means that these formal devices which are used, formal devices mean that different types of which are called figures of speech. There is can be simile, metaphor, irony, and then there is called that is characterization is there, plot is there, setting is there, hero is there, anti-hero is there, then imagery is there, setting is there, everything is there, form is there. Form means stylistic devices. Each and every word that is written on page, that is a form. When that is a form, it means that that form is source of meaning. Neither writer nor reader is the source of meaning. So, whereas the key principles of Russian formalism are concerned, these are very important. These will tell us that what actually this Russian formalism is. Aesthetic aspects are important. Aesthetic aspects are important mean the beauty of that text is important, because when beauty of a text is maintained, only it can give us aesthetic pleasure. And if just when we say that writer is the source of meaning, so at that time meanings are drawn and no aesthetic aspects are drawn, no aesthetic pleasure. A reader is the source of meaning, still there is nothing like aesthetics. So aesthetics mean this is usually called art for art's sake. Mean that art itself is important. Different types of how words are selected, how is the arrangement of words, how sentences are made, how is the setting, how is there the plot, what type of words are used, what type of imagery is used, what type of symbols are used, what type of persons are there, whether that the tone is optimistic or tone is that's called optimistic is tone, tone is sad, tone is something with merrymaking, tone can be anything. So all these things are aesthetic devices. When we go through a piece of literature and we understand that form, then we enjoy aesthetic pleasure. And Russian formalists were of the view that aesthetic pleasure must not be ignored, it must be given preference. Then there is focus on form. One is form, other is content. Form means that written words, content mean meaning. So according to them, form and content are not somewhat different. They are different and at the same time they are also same, because they say that form itself is content. You are not going to say that this is content is separate, something separate from form. Form and content, they are same. Form is that, content is that. Mean that very form is containing the real content and message. Then text focused. Text focused, again it is that only and only text is source of meaning. Form. Words on page are source of meaning. Read a text on its own terms mean the text is not a thing which is depending upon something. Text is an independent entity. All the words which are part of text, they have their own terms and conditions. How they are arranged, why they are arranged, and for what purpose they are arranged, it means there is something. Now in that arrangement there is aspect of aesthetics. Then there is also a form, because beautiful form means beautiful aesthetics. Dull form means dull aesthetics. Then these aesthetic aspects and form, when they are joined together, the result will be that there will be a text. And then we must read a text on its own. Then this is literariness. Whereas the Russian formalists are concerned, they concentrate upon the concept of literariness. Literariness means that, no, there are different types of books in this world. There are books upon sociology, economics, upon religion, there are religious books, there are books about philosophy, there are books about physics, chemistry, biology, there are books about political science, there are books about history. No, all these are also books. And then there, on the other hand, there are books about drama, novel, short story or poetry. Now, according to Russian formalist, what is the thing that makes a piece of literature full of literariness? So it means that there is something special with a drama, a novel, a short story or a poetry which makes it literary, and we say that this piece of literature is having literariness and these other things are not having literariness. So whereas this literariness is concerned, it means that a book, a drama or novel is having poetic language. There is use of poetic language. Now there are two types of languages. One is the everyday language. Everyday language means that language which is used for common day-to-day purposes, for conversation, for our common daily activities. Then poetic language or scientific language is that language which is properly arranged. When it is properly arranged, means that the result will be something literariness. So when there is literariness, so this is the reason that there is a specific type of arrangement of language, and here the aesthetic aspects are also kept in mind. Then the stress is upon form, text is focused, means that everything is beautifully arranged, and then there is poetic language is used. So this is the reason that a book on sociology cannot be said to be a piece of literature or having literariness, because it is a thing which is related with the drama, novel or short story. So a book must have a literariness according to Russian formalist. And then there is a defamiliarization. Defamiliarization, this is usually discussed with reference to Viktor Shulvitsky, and in his most important essays, Art as Technique, there he says that defamiliarization means that there are familiar things, all these objects in simple language everyday. When you're using everyday language, there are familiar things. When you are going to use poetic language, you are going to defamiliarize this thing. When you do anything for the first time, that is defamiliarization, and when you do it again and again, that is called that means that it is nothing. There is not a thing that can be called defamiliarization. So according to these critics, defamiliarization must be a part of a piece of literature, because this is a use of language that is different from the use of language by a common man. Now this is the reason that when we go through a piece of literature, we go through a drama, novel, short story or poetry, we come to know that the arrangement of words, sentences, images, everything is different, everything is defamiliarized. Means we are most of the time confused, we start thinking that how it is going to happen with this. And the most important example of defamiliarization is Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. There are different type of, that for example, when he is going into a country where there are human beings, there are very much in height, then in another place there are human beings who are very much diminished in their stature. So that is called defamiliarization. To describe something new that is totally different, that's mind-boggling. Then text is made of stylistic devices. Different styles are used. For example, there is a use of proper beginning, middle and end. Then there is auto characterization, there is setting stylistics, there are used, similes are used, metaphors are used, and then onomatopoeia is used, personification is used. These are all stylistic devices. So this tells us that what are the meanings. Then fabula and sujet, if these are concerned. So mostly this Russian formalism, it was related with poetry, how to analyze poetry. But if you want to understand a drama, novel or short story, so these two terms are very much important. Whereas fabula is concerned, fabula means just story. There is just story, and any story can be called fabula. Whereas this sujet is concerned, it means plot. Plot means that beginning, middle and end. What's plot? Plot is action. Action is movement of a character from position A to position B, from one position to the other, where he either dies or he has to face totally different set of circumstances. This is called action, and this is also called plot. And plot is always a life and soul of a piece of literature. So plot means proper arrangement. Now here we will come to know, by keeping in mind Russian formalism, that whether the plot is linear, plot is non-linear, it has proper beginning, middle and end, it is set in a very good manner or not. This is called fabula and sujet. Then there is word choices. Word choices mean that what type of words are used by these writers, these Russian formalists, are in order to, by the writer, so that it may be analyzed. Then no interest in culture and closely. No interest in culture means that again it is against contextual meanings. Culture, whatever is the type of culture in which that drama, novel, short story or poetry is written, that's not important. Culture is negated. Culture is not given any importance. Words on page are source of meaning. Why words on page are source of meaning? Because when time changes and space changes, readers change. A writer is no more there. But with the passage of time, a text is the same. Text is the same thing. Text remains same. It stays same. Only space changes, time changes, culture changes, religious systems change, social backgrounds change, cultural background change, everything changes, and reader changes. The reader changes mean that culture also changes. So a text is a thing which is independent, and it is not interested in culture, because text is a thing which is always depending upon itself for meaning. And last but not the least, the most important thing is close reading of the text. Again means words on page are the source of meaning. Now the last important question is, why does it end so soon? It ended so soon because these were the extremists. These were extremists. They were of the view that context, social, political, moral, ethical, religious background is nothing. Autobiography of the writer is nothing. Biography of the writer is nothing. We are not supposed to deal with class struggle by keeping in mind the Marxism. And Marxism was practiced there. But there are two things, that when we separate literature from cultural background, that remains no literature, because literature is always the product of that society. When a literature is the product of that society, it means that actual real literature is that literature, and when it is cut off from that society, it means it is no literature. And Russian formalists, they did so that they started cutting this literature from its culture, its context. So the result was that it remained for a few years in practice, for about 10 years or so, and then it was no more in practice. Now again, this is a theory which tells us where the meanings lie. So form is the source of meaning according to this theory.